Question 2C. It says here, Mr. Jake Gray and his fiancée, Joy, arrived at a hotel as guests and paid for a week's stay in advance. After checking in, they went up in the bedroom allotted to them. And on the door, there was a notice stating that the hotel will not be liable for any articles lost or stolen. Jake and Joy went to dinner later that night and left her jewelry in a safe in the bedroom, which was locked by a key. She left the key with the receptionist. Upon their return to the room, they found out that the jewelry was stolen. They now say, Joy seeks your advice. Advise Joy. You must advise her for 15 marks. So this case now, this case scenario now, focus on exemption clause. And if you look on every past paper each semester, the examiner always like to put a question like this on exemption clause, a case scenario. So now we're going to now look at the ways in terms of how to answer question in business law, right? I mean, you can write your answers in paragraph, but what I'm going to give you is the correct structure of how to answer business law cases. To be able to answer a case scenario like that, you're going to have to put your answer under 4 sections, which the lecturer would have given you already. And these are the 4 sections for the answer. So you're going to have to state the issue. These are the 4 sections. You have to state the issue. You have to state the principle of law. You have to apply it, and you have to have a conclusion. Okay? So that's the fastest way for you to be able to answer a business law question when it relates to a case. You have to state the issue, right? The principle of law. You have to be able to apply yourself, and then you have to state your conclusion. So, just to break down the case, this question. They said Mr. Gray and Mrs. Gray went to a hotel. It is when they reached their bedroom, they saw a sign on the door and in the clothes closet saying that the hotel is not going to be liable for anything that is lost if it is not handed over to the manager for safekeeping. We are not responsible. So Mr. and Mrs. Gray put Mrs. Gray's expensive diamond watch in the safe box in the bedroom and locked it with a key and went downstairs for dinner. And when they came back now, the diamond watch was missing. Alright, the watch was missing. They now say we must advise Miss Joy if the hotel is going to be found liable. Is that clear? So the first thing I have right here, you can have your answer, you can write your answer in different ways based on your own style of writing. So right here I have, the issues are, at least I was able to find more than one issue in this case scenario. The issues are, 1, whether the hotel can rely on the exemption clause that was placed in the bedroom and clothes closet. That's one issue. And I put question mark. Second issue, whether Mr. Gray and his fiancée can bring a successful claim against the hotel. That's our next issue. Remember, the hotel workers weren't in the bedroom when they were putting the jewelry in the safe. So those are the 2 issues that we have to look at. The principle of law. The principle of law in this case relates to exemption clause. So I have to state that. Right? Because we are looking at an exemption clause case. And then after I state it's an exemption clause or exclusion clause, I can put a full stop. Exemption clause, I have to define what an exemption clause is now. It is a clause in a contract which purports to exclude liability altogether or to restrict it by limiting damages or by imposing other onerous conditions. So an exemption clause in a contract is like a sentence, like a clause saying, look here, we are not going to be liable for anything that happens to your property at our business place. Or it could also be a clause that says, okay, if anything happens between A, B, C, D, E, we are only responsible for E part alone. You understand? We're not responsible for A to D. So that's an example of an exemption clause. They are either excluding liability altogether or part of the liability. Is that clear? So I define what an exemption clause is. Then I now say, okay, this can be seen in the case of Ollie versus Marlborough Coast Hotel in relation to Mr. Gray and Ms. Joy. So I state principle of law, which is exemption clause. I define it and give a name of the case that it relates to. Then I now move on further to my application now. The application now, the hotel cannot be exempted from the liability because reasonable steps were not taken to bring the notice to Mr. Gray and his fiance's attention. This can be seen in the case of Ollie versus Marlborough Coast Hotel. I have to now bring it to the scenario of that case now. I have to tell them what the case is about now. In which a husband and wife paid in advance off and checked into a hotel suite. Reasonable checks were not taken to bring the exemption clause to their notice until they had actually reached their room. The wife left her purse on the bed, locked the self-locking door, and returned the keys to the reception area. On returning to her room, the wife found her purse missing. The hotel could not rely on the exemption clause since reasonable steps were not taken to bring the clause to her attention when the contract was completed at the check-in area or the reception area. The clause was in the bedroom, but should have been in the reception area where the contract was completed. So the husband and wife already reached their bedroom, and then that's when they saw the clause. The clause should have been in the reception area where the contract was completed. So the clause came late. Then in terms of the conclusion now, Mr. Gray and Ms. Joy can have a successful claim against the hotel because the exemption clause removing the hotel of any liability came late. The hotel would not be able to rely on the exemption clause because the scenario in their case is identical to our previous case, Ollie versus Marlborough Coast Hotel, in which the defendant was found liable. So I leave it, I put my answer like that. Question? So for you to be able to move fast in the exam and answer the case, you have to itemize it like that under those 4 subheadings. Right? Makes it a little more easier for you. Because if you're just writing it out in a paragraph form, you might leave out some vital details in the paragraph and put this in your principle of law, which will be incorrect. So you're mixing up yourself. But once in a structured way like this, it makes it much easier. Is that clear?
Sir.
Yes, question.
The top part about the conclusion.
Yes.
Is
application.
application, it reiterated what the question was about, and so on.
The case was about.
What the case was about. Right?
Yes.
So if you, in what you did in the conclusion, if you include
Part of it.
right, if you, for example, say this case is concerned with the exemption clause.
For which part, the application part or the
No,
conclusion?
when you read the conclusion a while ago, I'm saying that's basically everything summed up.
Correct.
So, in my head, I'm saying it seems kind of sufficient to me, but when I looked at it and said it's 15 marks, I'm thinking I may need it to kind of stretch it out a little bit more.
No, that's the scenario of the case.
Yeah, we put in the scenario.
Yeah, the scenario in the application. And remember, you're under exam condition. There's no way you're going to have time to be writing probably 4 or 5 pages.
No, I was just saying the conclusion. I wouldn't be going in.
The conclusion is that, let's look at this. I understand what you're saying. Look at this here. What was the issue?
Mm-hmm.
The issues were if the hotel could rely on the exemption clause.
Mm-hmm.
That was one issue. Because the exemption clause was in the bedroom. The second issue was if this couple could bring a successful claim against the hotel.
So in the exam, do I have to write those? Do I have to write that? Because I'm saying your conclusion is dealing with that.
No, you have to write it.
Okay, okay.
You have to write it. Even if you don't show like, even if you don't put like issue, principle, what do you call it? When you are starting your essay, you're going to say, okay, there are certain issues we need to look at in this question, which are the exemption clause was in the which was in the bedroom. Will that exemption clause be effective? So you can put it like that. And then if the next issue is if this couple can bring a successful claim against the hotel, then you continue by saying this case deals with exemption clause. And then you have to define what an exemption clause is and state the case before you start applying it. Alright? So it all depends on your own style of writing. And as I said, make sure you pay attention to this because if you look at all past paper, the examiner always like to give exemption clause on every one of them. So what you just need to remember is the Olive versus Marlborough case, a famous case. But you have to look at where the exemption clause was placed. Was it in the bedroom or was it in the reception area? That was the key thing in this case.